Well, yeah. So, hey, everyone. We just thought, in the midst of all this kind of craziness that's going on, and not being able to kind of sit down with you and chat in a normal way, that we would just kind of come on and kind of interview each other, Steve and I, and give you a little bit of a glimpse into our process and what we've been going through as your pastors during this time. So yeah, why don't we start with you, Steve? How you been doing? How you been processing and dealing with all this?
Yeah, this is kind of a weird thing, isn't it? It's like we've got this kind of inner sort of wiring that we as pastors need to be talking all the time with no one to talk to. We resort to this, don't we?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh boy. Sean, that's a really good question. And I think it's probably a question we ask of each other a lot. Hey, is how you doing? And the impulse is to say fine or what have you. But man, it really is a season where you put a lot more thought into how you're doing because everything is so different. Hey.
definitely.
For me, it's and this is a place where Sean and I've had a lot of conversation just because he and we process these different things differently, and so this has been a real discovery time. Whereas times of crisis or whatever are actually kind of in a way energizing for me. I really love the first couple weeks. I think I probably did the best because we had to respond to how do we do church differently,
Yeah,
and so to go into that kind of let's get her done sort of mode was really good. I found for me the most difficult is probably now coming into kind of where there's nothing fresh and new. Um, Now I start to become more aware of my inner processes and stuff like that. So my initial is, let's go, and maybe that's the fixer part of me, right? Is you see a problem and you look for ways to fix it. But I'm curious, Sean, like how are you doing?
yeah. Well, I feel busier than before, and I don't know if that's real or if it's just because I'm thinking more and
Mm,
trying to figure things out. I mean, because me, I'm a I'm a more intellectual processor than emotionally. So like I'm trying to figure things out. I'm trying to answer questions. So my mind's always going, and that has turned into kind of not sleeping great and those kind of things. But yeah, I kind of with you though. I kind of found it a little bit exciting at the beginning, and doing this new thing and seeing people come online to join us, and it kind of felt kind of novel, I guess. And yeah, I think now it's kind of just losing its novelty a little bit, and I just sort of want things to be back the way they were, and wondering if they're ever going to be back to the way it was exactly, and what's going to change, and just that whole uncertainty thing. I don't like that very much because I'm a routine type person, and
mm.
so it throws me off a little bit. But yeah, otherwise, coping like everybody else, right? Like I can't imagine this is easy for anyone. So yeah, yeah, and so our daily routines probably have looked a little bit different. I know you've chosen to work from home more than be in the office. You've found more productivity there. I'm kind of the other way around, right? I need that separation between home and work, and so tried to make it work here more at the office, I guess. But it's weird here too because normally, like you say, you can just get up and go walk and talk to Steve for a while if you have something you need to hash out or whatever. Now I feel like we have this sort of artificial way, and we've used it, I guess, to some degree pretty well, but it's just not the same. It doesn't feel as spontaneous maybe either.
Yeah, isn't it so interesting, Sean? Like just how different people can process things. You talked about how you're an intellectual processor and you feel busier and stuff like that. Man, it must take a lot more energy, to go through the processes when everything is new. Hey, or how is that for you?
Yeah, well, I guess I kind of there's two sort of pictures that came to my mind in terms of describing this. And one was, I don't know how it is nowadays, but back in the 70s when I was going to school, we'd have fire drills, and in those fire drills, you would basically have to line up in single file, and you weren't really supposed to be talking to each other and everything. And you knew that the fire drill was coming, you just didn't know exactly when, right? So the bell goes off, you get up, you do your thing, you get into single file, you quietly walk outside and stay in your line so that you can be counted and all that kind of stuff. And then, you're kind of waiting there. And at first it's kind of like, okay, this is great. I get to be out of class for a while and I'm outside and this is kind of cool. And then, a few minutes go by and you start, okay, well, when is this going to be over? And then maybe you see a fire truck pull up to the church or to the school and you wonder, maybe is this a drill or is this real? And you start, wondering, what's really going on in there? Like, are we going back? Are we not, kind of thing? And then as time goes by a little bit more, you start to worry a little bit and wonder, is this a real thing or whatever? And then after a while, you just kind of, well, come on already. Like, let's deal with this one way or the other. Are we going back into school? Are we going home? Whatever. So that was one of the things that went through my mind. And so I feel like I'm sort of in that place where we're sitting in the schoolyard, but nobody's telling us what's happening or what to do, and so you're kind of in limbo. But the other thing was, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to this, is we're grieving. We've lost, at least temporarily, a lot of the things that we sort of take for granted. And so I was looking at the grief cycle or the grief thing, and I don't know, I guess I could put this up on the screen for a second here. So just forgive me, I'm not an expert at this yet, but so you've got this sort of thing here, and I could very much relate to the beginning part there, the kind of, is this really happening sort of thing, that I remember that first day when it was kind of like, we went through 3 different processes, the lead team and I, in terms of, okay, are we going to stay open? Are we going to meet this week and just have these things put in place? And that was the decision we came to in the morning. And then by the afternoon, all the churches were shutting down, and and it's like the world changed in a 12-hour period there. But there was some elation, there was some excitement about it. But mostly confusion, maybe a little bit of fear and that kind of thing. And so for me in that cycle, I feel like I'm kind of stuck in that downslope there between the anger and the depression. And this is what went through my mind, is it's kind of like, let's say someone comes to you and says, a loved one has just passed away, but we haven't found the body. Okay, and so you're not quite sure whether you can move on or not, whether you can get to that acceptance phase. And of course, if you're like me, I'm like, well, I'm not going to rest until somebody can confirm for me that this person's really gone. So I feel like I'm sort of stuck in that place of, some days I feel kind of angry, some days I feel kind of depressed, and I feel like I'm not allowed to kind of move on and move to an acceptance type place and go forward. And what I find hard about that is I find it hard to be there for other people because I'm stuck in that place, and I'm sort of focused on, well, we got to find this out, right? We got to confirm this. And so you sort of feel a little bit of envy and maybe even a little bit of irritation for the people who seem to have just accepted it and are moving on and are cruising along. But at the same time, kind of like, I don't feel like those people could be there for me either, because we're just not in the same place. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of where I'm feeling. And I just feel like I'm not sure, do I accept it and just like move forward, or do I need to be in here and figure it out and fight? And I think that's where my fatigue comes from.
Well, that's a lot of mental processing, right? Is balancing
Yeah.
all those things. Because like you said, like you had a fire drill and you have some context for this. We haven't really had a fire drill on this one. We haven't really ever entertained how are we going to do church in a pandemic? So it's kind of like figuring everything out fresh,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, man, there's some times where it's just like, maybe now's a really good time to maybe put something on record for maybe future generations or whatever. It's like, I remember saying to someone the other day, is like, I just want someone to recommend the book to me, like how to do ministry in a pandemic, right?
Yeah. No kidding. And every profession, every part of our society really could use that now, because, everybody's
Totally.
flying. Yeah.
Like you just look at, our governments and stuff, and I do not envy them at all to have to be making these decisions, very complex decisions. And it seems like it's just a lose-lose sort of situation for them. So I don't envy their job. And we were just talking about schools and stuff like that, and just feeling for teachers, how many of them had a class in their training too, how to teach during a pandemic, right?
Exactly.
And how to adapt in that, and how complex it is for parents. How many of us have had any sort of training as to how to parent through a pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
So it really is a lot of additional, it seems like the work that it is that we do isn't really, it hasn't really increased in the quantity and stuff, but the complexity has increased. Wouldn't you say? Relationships are more complex because, you've got that added edge, like, we were just out for a walk and you kind of see someone on the street and it's like, okay, well, how are they kind of going to perceive if, like a stop to chat, am I giving them enough room that they feel comfortable in this conversation, right? Yeah. Or do they want to retreat back to their home? Do they, and the number of people that won't even make eye contact with you on the street, right? And you're like, okay, that's how you're processing, right?
Sure. And so many people are in such different places. Like some people aren't really too concerned about the virus so much. They're more concerned about the effects of everything. Other people are really like, man, I can't get this thing. Like, I'm really scared that I'm going to get sick here, or someone close to me is going to get it. And yeah, so it's just, nobody really knows what to do. You go shopping, right? And like things you used to just go through the motions. I think that's the thing that's tiring, right? You can't go through the motions right now. You have to be thinking about every step you take. And there's decision points at so many places where we typically just sort of go through the motions. And I think that's another struggle for me, is that a lot of those regular outlets that we have, like being able to sit down and watch a ball game or something like that, or, for our family, it would be maybe go spend a night in a hotel in the city or something like that, or, go walk around the mall, or, travel a little bit, whatever. All of those things have kind of been taken away. And so you're just stuck thinking about this stuff. And of course, it doesn't help that if you look at a screen at all, you're going to be bombarded with COVID-19 news stuff, right? And so you kind of feel like you have to shy away from that too. So it's like there's no normalcy, and none of those things that we use often to escape from reality with. And I'm finding that to be a challenge as well, as I'm sure a lot of people are.
Yeah. And I hope that just us having this conversation, just for other people too, is just, especially for those who might not get the opportunity to socialize with, online like this with other people, or have people in their own home environment, that they can just kind of process their stuff. Those of you that are shut in and living by yourself. Hopefully, just sitting in the conversation here with us, just recognizing that we wrestle through some of these things too. Mm-hmm. And these are some of the thoughts and feelings, and hopefully you feel a little bit connected with that. I like that you just kind of likened it to grieving, Sean. And like there's that kind of the image that you brought up there is like kind of the stages of grief and that sort of thing. And I have something similar to that too. Here, I like this one. It just kind of contextualizes grief in terms of like 4 tasks. This is from Warden's book on grief counseling or whatever. And because, just sometimes I find too, like, and you'd probably mention this too, it's really natural to kind of go through that grief process, and you might kind of backtrack on some of those different emotions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But this is something that I've just kind of kept at the front of my mind, just as I'm trying to kind of figure out how A, I deal with this, and B, how do I serve my family? It's just recognizing that there might be 4 critical tasks that they have to navigate through. And we might revisit some of these other tasks or whatever, accepting the reality of loss. I just kind of think of in this season, each day kind of brings a different loss. And we haven't quite been able to calculate all of them, right? Like I just even think now with the new announcement yesterday as to what will reopen, what won't. And then I talked to my son, and he kind of mentions, well, does that mean that my swimming season how will that be impacted? Because this was going to be the Manitoba Games summer, right? And he was really positioned to do well in that. And so something that was kind of the dream. So accepting the reality of some of those losses. And the reality is we don't quite know if it has been lost or not yet.
Yeah. Is it temporary or is it permanent? When? We just don't know. And so trying to accept something as a reality when you don't really know if it is the reality or not yet, kind of, I see all of those to be challenging right now, because you can't really, I'd like to go do that task or work through that thing, but I'm not sure how, and
Exactly.
I'm not sure what the reality actually is at this point. So it's not like someone has passed away. You've seen them, you've had the funeral, you've had all that kind of stuff. It's done. It's happened, and now you move to these next tasks. And I think that's where we're all feeling sort of stuck right now.
And, and I liked the image that you had brought up there, had a number of different emotional sort of things. I'm an emotional processor and stuff. And I do a lot of introspection and what is it that I'm feeling and stuff. And everyone, responds to that first task differently. Some will be angry. You shared that was kind of anger and frustration is kind of one of the challenges in wrestling. For me, I tend to deflect into humor or whatever. That's why if you walk past our house and stuff, there will always be some sort of humorous painting on the window or whatever, because I think my kids and my family have kind of learned to adapt to my way of whatever. And that's just kind of how we as a family sort of process. And there's other things that I do to that, but you're right. Task 1 is really hard because we don't even really quite know, no one can just tell us dates and stuff. So yesterday was good because it started to give a glimmer of, hey, right, there is maybe some level of normalcy in the future or whatever. And so I think today we can probably do a little bit better at processing the reality of the loss. Mm-hmm. But in that, you're still trying to get through that task, get to the second one, which is, working through the pain and grief and stuff, and you just talked again too about, what it means for you to work through that. And you'd like to work through it more on an intellectual basis. I tend to kind of go more towards my guitar and music has kind of been my coping sort of thing. I tend to work through those things emotionally and stuff. And
that's true. And we tend to give what we need, right? I think that's a pretty common thing. So like I'm more likely to give you an intellectual analysis of the situation and try to explain it because that's what I'm needing. Whereas you'll maybe use humor or maybe, target the emotions a little bit more and try to bring a positive feeling to the situation. I get my positive feeling from understanding, and being able to figure it out. And to some degree, even, and maybe this comes from the sports background or whatever, is I want to fight. I want to do something to fix it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's some things you just can't do that, and so that energy has to kind of just be bound up.
Yeah. Yeah, because who do you fight in this season, right? Like, there's
Exactly.
no identifiable enemy in that.
Yeah.
And I tend to hug
Exactly.
it out, right?
I know.
And so I wonder if sometimes you and people feel that from us on a typical Sunday morning and stuff like that,
Oh,
where, you know, it's like here's Steve on stage and you know, he's doing the hugging thing, and then here's
yeah,
Sean processing in his way. And so now you guys
sure.
got a little bit of a window into what's kind of going on in us. But then,
Yeah,
you know, the third and fourth tasks are important too, you know, just adjusting to the environment where the deceased is missing, the grieving process. You know, I think we're all finding ways to adjust. Like Sean says, his best way to adjust was to maintain as many of the routines as possible. And for me, in new situations, I need to come up with something fresh or whatever. And so because I did find a greater level of productivity from home, I adopted a kind of a new sort of way, and it's helpful too, because, you know, just in terms of the kids being home, and you know, Tara's still trying to work here from home too, that, you know, we try to do the schooling thing and parenting thing, and it's been really good. I think Jason and I are going to come out of the other end of this as excellent ping pong players. So you know,
yeah,
thinking that if all of a sudden we need a different occupational path, maybe professional ping pong will be in the plan for us.
right.
But that's my adjustment too, is you gather up kind of the things that are most familiar. For you, Sean, I hear you saying that, you know, it's routine and stuff gives you the greater sense of familiarity. For me, it's my family, and you kind of group up and kind of try to find ways of connecting that. We've done a ton of puzzles. We've played a lot of board games.
Yeah,
You know, binge watching favorite TV shows together or whatever, kind of set up a little new sort of area for watching whatever it is that we're going to watch, and it's kind of fun to do something fresh and new that way. But
yeah.
that's how we've adjusted. Are there things that you've done, Sean, to adjust, or?
Well, yeah, you bring up family there, and well, first of all, you know, it's just interesting as you were talking. I was like, how did we respond initially, even in terms of doing church? I know that my goal was to just bring as much normalcy as possible in this, and then other folks, even on the lead team, it's like, you know, they're more into innovation and how can we use this to our advantage, and I'm kind of wanting to just make it as normal as possible because that's what I need. But not everybody needs that. Some will, some won't. But in terms of family, it hasn't really changed our routine all that much, and part of that is because, you know, our girls aren't in school. So that's a huge adjustment for so many families. That hasn't been the case in our situation. So our daily routines actually have not changed very much in all of this. And I know, you know, for people who have lost their jobs, for people who, you know, did have kids in childcare or school, much bigger adjustment that way. So for us, it hasn't really changed our daily routines that much, you know, other than dealing with some of the different ways that we process feelings and what this is meaning to us. You know, some are more like more afraid of the virus in our family than others, and others are more afraid of, you know, what's this going to mean for our future going forward, and how are things going to change in our society and things like that. So it's led to some pretty good discussions and that kind of thing. But other than that, it hasn't been a huge adjustment other than sort of recreationally in our house.
Yeah. You know, and that can be one of the, you bring up some things that just kind of spark some thoughts too. It's hard, like when you're, it's like sometimes you even feel guilty when we're doing as well as we are. Like, am I allowed to do well in this season?
Yeah.
That's one of the challenges I find too, is kind of like, you know, when I know that this has been a season that's been so hard, people have experienced great losses, and that sort of thing. And for me, sometimes it's you feel a little guilty because you're making this list of these things that you're grateful for, which is one of the ways I think is healthy to deal with the different stresses and anxieties, is to kind of count your blessings or whatever. But I just kind of see how this has really exposed to me some of maybe the unhealthy patterns in my life. It's forced a bit of a slowdown in some contexts. You can't do all that you were doing before, and so you kind of take greater notice
Yeah.
of the things that you really value, and it's actually been a really good season, I feel, for me, to like I said, have we don't have sports that we're rushing off to every evening. It's kind of like we ask the family, hey, so what do you guys got up this evening? And you're like, oh wait, nobody's got anything. And you can kind of suddenly go like, oh, hey, we could actually do something together. We could go walk the dog together and that sort of thing. And sometimes I feel guilty for enjoying the season.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think is happening for a lot of people is, and I've said before how when I came here, I was surprised how busy everybody is and how many things they're involved in. And of course now, I'm sure that it's driving some people absolutely crazy that they don't have that busyness in their lives. But on the other hand, I think, like you're saying, yeah, it's caused us to kind of look around and wake up and oh, hey, wait a minute, I don't have to be running around like that. Maybe there's some other things, and maybe this is actually going to change a little bit about how we do family and life in the future. The other thing that's going through my mind is right now people are going to be going through a lot of different things, and I think we need to. And I know this is hard for me as a man, as a counselor, as a whatever, is to not be trying to fix it, to not be trying to help somebody not be depressed. Like, I've learned a long time ago, even personally, but also in working with other people, is that sometimes we just need to be in the place where we are for a while. Most people, if they're having a period of anger, they're having a period of depression or anxiety or whatever, they'll find ways to work themselves out of that. And sometimes when we try to pull them out, we can actually put them deeper in. And that's something for me that I'm trying to remember is I don't need to fix anybody. I don't need to make you not feel depressed or make you not anxious or make you happy. Just be where you are. Let yourself process that through it. And most of us will come out on the other end most of the time. And obviously, if it lingers, if you're finding it to be a real struggle, then yeah, you may need to get some help with that or whatever. But yeah, I think I want to just put that out there to people. It's okay, whatever you're feeling right now, whatever process you're going through right now, it's okay. And even if it's different from somebody else, or even if you feel like maybe, am I the only one that feels this way? Don't worry about that stuff. Just allow yourself to be where you're at, to be feeling what you're feeling, and you'll come through it. You'll figure it out. We're pretty malleable. We're pretty adaptable species, if you will, right? So.
Sean, you bring up some really good stuff there, and I'm just wondering if you could just kind of share what are some things that are okay for us to be feeling in this time, and how long and how intensely should I feel them before I do ask for some help?
Yeah, well, and I think this is especially a challenge for Christians because I think sometimes we feel a pressure that if you're depressed, there's something wrong. If you're angry, there's something wrong. As a Christian, you shouldn't feel those things, right? Like, if I have strong faith, I won't be worried. I won't be afraid. Those kind of things. And God gave us emotions. God gave us feelings. I would first, sort of look at, am I assessing the situation with a sense of clarity and common sense? So, for instance, how am I contributing to my own anxiety and depression that is maybe more than I need to at the moment? So, sort of just allowing yourself to think rationally, and maybe having conversations with other people and saying, hey, is this a normal way of thinking right now? And is there a different way I could think about it that might help me feel differently? But I think at this point, I think right now is probably when we're going to be hitting the peak of those difficult emotions. Because, again, if we look at that wave. It's kind of like the first few weeks, I think everybody was doing pretty good, and this is exciting, new and everything. And I think now it's like, okay, I'm at a point where I either have to get used to this and accept it and move forward with it, or I need to wait, or I need, so I would say if you're, if you're having real thoughts of hopelessness or helplessness, or if you just can't seem to get that fear out of your system, then yeah, I would think maybe you need to take a little bit more intentional action. If you're, especially with the hopelessness, because it's easy right now, and I've gone there. It's like, is life ever going to be the same again? And, depending on what you're listening to and stuff, you'll have more or less of that. But lots of stuff happens all the time in our world. We always get through it. It always, whether it changes or not, we always get through it. And I think we just need to remind ourselves of that this is going to pass. Yeah, it might look different on the other end, but not all of that different is necessarily going to be bad, right? And just, look back and say, okay, well, yeah, that seemed pretty bad. I thought there was no way I was ever going to get through that. Well, here I am today, right? And just use those experiences, trusting God's faithfulness that, he's got it all under control, and he's got this under control too. And if I'm in him, seek him, I'll be all right. What about you? You got any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, as you were just talking about that, I was just thinking, one of the things that I just kind of observe in seasons like this, they really serve to amplify the things that we do naturally experience emotionally. When we've got so little that's familiar and stuff like that, it just seems to really amplify. People who are angry tend to get more angry. People who get sad tend to get more sad, and those are all very natural. And it's really, you identified it. I think people were doing relatively well in the first few weeks because we went immediately to we put on our best behavior. And I just even kind of look at my own interactions on social media or whatever. You kind of look at your social media feeds or whatever. First few weeks is all that we're all in this together, right? And everyone was like kumbaya, and we're all sitting in our houses. We're all in this together. And now I find that my social media feeds are really, really negative, where some of those other emotions, the best behavior is kind of worn off, and now some of the amplification of the natural and you know what, it's I do appreciate there's this one post where it just kind of says, now as things are kind of loosening, just be gracious, be kind to people because everyone's processing. I thought there's some real merit to that one. I think all emotions, all the spectrum of emotions are pretty natural. I think we can just in this time experience them to be amplified a little bit. And I just really want to encourage people too, like we still have phone numbers, and we can meet with you one-on-one here on Zoom or some other method and stuff like that, and just talk through it. The reason Sean and I are doing this is because, this is how we've been coping, is we talk like this on a daily basis and just kind of process some of those things, because we need to be able to manage our stuff so we can kind of continue on to live the life or whatever that we need to live and function the way that we need to function. This is helpful. This process.
And even if it's not us, you might know someone else who is dealing with this, maybe it's somebody else too, but yeah, we're certainly available for those kind of things. The other thing that was going through my mind is, we've talked about this before, when it gets to this point, it's really easy to be trying to find somebody to blame, right? So the Democrats are blaming the Republicans, vice versa, you got this blaming that. That's really a no-win situation, and I understand that it's a kind of a natural reaction, but now is not the time to be looking for a place to put blame in anything. It's just not going to be beneficial. So grace is huge right now. Let's live up to our name as a church and be really graceful. and I want to say, be graceful with yourself too. Like,
Mm.
don't judge yourself for how you're feeling, what you're thinking. That's kind of what I was saying before too, is just let yourself be feeling what you're feeling, and be graceful with yourself and with others.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Sean, that you bring up, that, maybe that's one of the things that we should probably intercept in our own thought processes. If we find that our thought processes are going to a regular sort of blame
Hmm.
sort of place, that's probably one to kind of trail back and just heed those wise words of grace, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I just, for everyone, I just want to say, you know, uh, right now I feel very connected to all of you, and I know that sounds funny, but it's kind of like when you lose something, or you miss it for a while, you appreciate it more. And I think I'm there with a lot of things, but especially with our church family. And I get really excited, when we're firing up the service on Sunday mornings, and I start to see the number of viewers start to increase. I start to see the chat firing up underneath the screen there, and I'm excited about that, and I can't wait to physically do that again with everyone. But for now, this is what we have, and yeah, I encourage us to just really find joy in the things that we have, and not be focused on what
Mm.
we don't have right
I totally agree with you, Sean. I think that my prayer for our church is become so much more intensified, just because maybe that's one of the ways that I can express kind of my longings to be together again or whatever. And I
now.
feel that it's really tough, right, to have this intensity of your prayer time and have no outlet for it tangibly.
Yeah. Hmm.
You can't hug any harder across a
Yeah.
video
Yeah.
screen, right? You can't do a lot of those things, and it's tough too when you just have no idea when you're going to be able to return to that.
Yeah.
So just for what it's worth, I just want to say, we love you guys, and we're missing you so much, and yeah, we can still feel connected, and that's very authentic, our desire to be together with you guys, and just please be assured that our constant prayers and thoughts are with you.
Yep. Yep. For sure. Yeah. I don't know that I got anything else to
Yeah,
say.
I was just like, are we
Uh,
done for today, Sean? Like,
yeah, probably.
we've done all our
People are going to
feeling
start
stuff.
getting bored of listening to us.
You did all your intellectual processing, you figured out all the problems, and I gushed, so we should probably
Yeah,
be good to go for today. Hey,
I think so. Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this with me, Steve, and
you too, Sean.
yeah, and take care, everyone. God
Bye
bless you.
bye.